At 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up. My wife wasn't there. I went downstairs and noticed her second phone lying face down on the kitchen counter. Then I heard the back door click shut. Looking through the window, I saw her quietly disappearing into the darkness. I quickly threw on a jacket and followed her from a distance. A few minutes later, she stopped in front of house number 7, less than a 5-minute walk from our home. When I finally looked through the window and saw who was waiting for her inside, I stood frozen in shock. I appreciate you being here with me today. Before we begin, leave me a comment. Are you listening while driving, working, or just winding down? I read these more than you think, and your voice matters. Quick note. Certain details are fictionalized for storytelling and reflection. The heart of this story, the lesson is what I hope stays with you. I have spent 30 years reading human behavior, and a phone flipped face down is the body language of someone hiding something. The Tuesday morning sunlight came through the Highland Park kitchen windows, at the angle that meant 7 o'clock, the angle that had marked breakfast in this house for 17 years. Mary Ann Prescott, 54, moved through the kitchen, with familiar Grace eggs in the pan toast, in the toaster coffee already poured. Her dark hair was pulled back in the way she always wore it before 8 in the morning, and she hummed something I didn't recognize while she worked. Everything about the scene was normal, except for the phone. The second phone? She kept it on the counter face down next to the cutting board. Every time she stepped away to get the orange juice from the refrigerator, to grab plates from the cabinet, she flipped it face down first. The gesture was small, automatic, the kind of behavioral tell that most people wouldn't notice and fewer would remember. I noticed everything. I remembered everything. Leo Prescott, 16, dropped into his chair with a mild complaint of a teenager facing a Tuesday morning school day, his dark hair still pressed flat from sleep. Mom, do we have the good cereal or just the healthy stuff? He asked. The healthy stuff is the good cereal, Mary Ann said, setting eggs in front of him with a smile. You have a chemistry test today. Protein matters. Dad, can you help me with my computer science project tonight? Leo turned to me with the easy trust of a son who had never had reason to doubt either parent. Of course, I said. What time works for you? After dinner, it's due Friday, and I'm stuck on the algorithm part. 7:30, I said. We'll figure it out. Mary Ann glanced at me across the kitchen, her expression warm and familiar. Leo, don't forget parent-teacher conference is Thursday. Your father and I are both going. Great, Leo said, with the tone that meant it wasn't great at all, but he'd survive. I watched Mary Ann's hand drift toward the phone again. She checked it without picking it up, just a glance at the screen, then returned to slicing strawberries. The phone stayed face down. How many mornings had I sat here watching this exact choreography and chosen not to see what was in front of me? How many times had I told myself that the second phone was for her property management business, Meridian LLC, the small company she'd built? Managing short-term rentals, and that successful people often carried 2 phones to separate work from personal life. How many times had I been lying to myself? I drank my coffee and made appropriate conversation. I asked Leo about his chemistry test. I confirmed Thursday's conference. I mentioned a patient consultation I had scheduled for the afternoon, leaving out names and details the way I always did, maintaining professional boundaries, even at the breakfast table. Mary Ann smiled at all the right moments. Leo complained about school with teenage predictability. The kitchen smelled like coffee and toast, and the vanilla candle Mary Ann kept lit on the counter. Everything was perfect. Everything was wrong. The moment stretched and collapsed like a quantum state, Tuesday morning normalcy, observed and therefore destroyed by the act of observation itself. I finished my coffee. Leo grabbed his backpack. Mary Ann kissed his forehead and reminded him about soccer practice. The second phone stayed face down on the counter until we both left, and then I heard her pick it up as I walked to my car. 20 hours later, I woke to a cold bed and an empty house. Wednesday, 4 o'clock in the morning. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed green in the darkness of the master bedroom. I reached across to Mary Ann's side of the bed, sheets cool, pillow undented, not recently vacated, gone for hours. I didn't panic. I didn't call out. I didn't check the bathroom or the kitchen or any of the places a spouse might reasonably be at 4 in the morning. Instead, I reached for my phone and opened an app I'd installed 6 months ago. The app had an innocuous name, Family Locator, and an innocuous story behind it. 6 months ago, Mary Ann had left her second phone somewhere, couldn't remember where, spent an evening frustrated and anxious. I'd suggested a backup GPS tracker just in case. Practical, helpful. The concerned husband offering a simple solution. I had been lying to myself then too. 6 months ago, I told myself the GPS was just practical, but some part of me, the part that noticed face-down phones and remembered patterns, had known I was installing evidence, not convenience. The app loaded. One blue dot appeared on the map, steady and unmoving. House number 7 Oak Lawn Avenue, 400 meters from where I sat. I knew Oak Lawn Avenue. It ran parallel to our street 1 block east. I drove past the entrance every time I left Highland Park heading south. I'd lived in this neighborhood for 17 years and never had a reason to walk to the end of that street, never had a reason to wonder about house number 7. The GPS pin glowed steady, not moving. Not at a hotel or an all-night diner or any of the places a person might plausibly be at 4 in the morning. 400 meters, less than a 5-minute walk from the bed, where I'd slept beside my wife for 17 years. I sat in the darkness and thought about phones flipped face down. I thought about Meridian LLC and property management and business trips that sometimes ran late. I thought about Leo asking for help with computer science and Marianne reminding him about parent-teacher conferences with the practiced warmth of a mother who cared deeply about her son's education. I thought about 17 years of marriage and whether I'd spent them married to a person or a performance. Then I thought about what a psychiatrist does when a patient presents with anxiety about facing something they've been avoiding. I teach them to count to 10, acknowledge the fear, choose to move forward anyway. I counted to 10 in the dark. The GPS pin glowed steady on my phone screen, house number 7, 400 meters from where I sat. I stood up, pulled on my jacket, and walked to the back door. Tonight I had a reason to see the end of Oak Lawn Avenue. 4 minutes through empty Highland Park streets. October air warm during the day, cold enough at 4 in the morning to remind you winter was coming. The house at the end of Oak Lawn Avenue was dark except for one window, amber light bleeding through drawn curtains at 4:17 in the morning. I stood across the street and looked at house number 7, the way I'd taught myself to look at patients during intake interviews. Observe without judgment. Catalog without emotion. See what's actually there. 2 stories, craftsman style, well-maintained, silver sedan in the driveway. Light from the kitchen window casting gold onto the lawn. I crossed the street and moved closer, staying where the streetlight didn't reach. The curtains were drawn, but not completely. Through the gap, I could see the kitchen. They were eating, late dinner or early breakfast. Dominic said something and Marianne laughed, not the polite laugh she used at faculty dinners, the real laugh, the one I'd heard when we were dating when she still thought psychiatrists were interesting instead of exhausting. The worst betrayals are not the ones that shock you. They're the ones that once seen make perfect sense of everything you chose to ignore. Marianne reached across and touched the 17-year-old's hand, automatic and maternal, the kind of touch that comes from years of practice. He said something, and she smiled, warmth spreading across her face the way sunlight spreads when you open curtains. I recognized that smile. I had married that smile, and I had not seen it in my own home directed at me or at Leo in more years than I wanted to count. The woman at that table was my wife. The smile on her face was one I'd fallen in love with, and watching her give it to strangers at 4:20 in the morning felt like watching someone spend money stolen from your account. The betrayal wasn't just the theft, it was the casual ease with which they enjoyed spending it. I stood in the dark and counted to 10, the technique I taught anxious patients. Acknowledge what you see, accept that it's real, decide what to do next. 1, 2, 3, they looked happy. 4, 5, 6, they looked like a family. 7, 8, 9, a family funded by money, meant for my son's future while I slept 400 meters away. 10, I turned and walked back without sound. Walking away from house number 7 was like closing a case file on a patient, except this time the patient was my own life, and the diagnosis was terminal. Behind me, the kitchen light stayed on. Marianne's laugh carried faintly through October air, then distance swallowed it. I reached my house at 4:30 and went directly to my office, the small room at the back where I kept patient files and reference books I still preferred to databases. I sat at my desk and turned on the lamp. Patterns emerge when you finally allowed yourself to see them. 17 years of careful deception assembled itself with the clarity of a structural blueprint. I would not confront her. Confrontation was for people who wanted catharsis or reconciliation. I wanted documentation, evidence, the kind of airtight case that would hold up in family court and explain to my son why his mother was no longer part of his daily life. And I wanted timing. Leo's sweet 16 party. 3 weeks from today. Marianne had been planning it for months with enthusiasm she usually reserved for her other family. Guest list caterer's venue. She wanted it perfect. It would be perfect, just not the way she imagined. 3 weeks gave me time to gather documentation, time to contact a forensic accountant, time to build something that couldn't be defended against or explained away with tears and apologies. 3 weeks from now, in front of family and friends and Leo's classmates, I would present what I'd found. Not with anger, not with drama, with facts, with dates. With the calm, measured delivery of a psychiatrist presenting a diagnosis to a patient who'd been lying to themselves for years. Through the office window, dawn turned the Dallas sky from black to deep blue to pale gray. Somewhere in house number 7, Marianne was probably climbing into bed beside Dominic, exhausted from maintaining 2 families. In 3 weeks, Leo would turn 16 at a party Marianne was already planning, with enthusiasm I could hear in her voice each evening. She had no idea that party would be the last time she controlled any narrative in this family. I stood up, straightened my tie, and went upstairs to make breakfast. I made coffee and waited. At 6:30, I heard Marianne's key in the back door. She walked into the kitchen with the easy confidence of someone who believed their lies were invisible. "Good morning," she said, kissing my cheek the way she had for 17 years. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said. She was planning my son's birthday party, and I was planning to make it something she would never forget. By 7:15, Leo had stumbled downstairs, and Marianne had transformed the kitchen into the command center for what she called the best Sweet 16 Highland Park has ever seen. She stood at the counter with her tablet, scrolling through venue options with the enthusiasm of someone spending money they felt entitled to spend. "I'm thinking the Highland Park Club," she said, looking at Leo with maternal warmth that would have seemed genuine if I hadn't seen her direct the exact same expression at an 18-year-old stranger 6 hours ago. "Live band, maybe 80 guests. What do you think, sweetheart?" Leo looked up from his cereal with the mild horror of a teenager facing his mother's party ambitions. "Mom, that's a lot of people. Do I even know 80 people? Your friends from school, your soccer team, our family, Dad's colleagues, my clients from Meridian." She ticked them off on her fingers like she was listing assets in a portfolio, which, in a way, she was. Every guest would be a witness. She just didn't know to what. "It sounds perfect, Marianne." I said, my voice carrying the warmth of a supportive husband instead of the clinical detachment of a psychiatrist observing a patient who had no idea they were being diagnosed. "You've always been good at organizing these things." She smiled at me, grateful, affectionate, completely unsuspecting. I wanted to be special. 16 is such an important birthday. How many times had I watched her plan family events with this same meticulous care, never once wondering where the money came from? How many birthdays and anniversaries and holiday gatherings had she orchestrated with stolen funds while I sat at the table nodding approval, writing checks to cover costs that should have been covered by her legitimate business income? The irony was perfect. She would fund Leo's party with money embezzled from accounts I'd trusted her to manage. And at that party, in front of 80 carefully selected witnesses, I would present the evidence of exactly how she'd paid for it. "The band needs a deposit by next week." She continued making notes on her tablet. "And I'll need to confirm the caterer. Leo, any food preferences?" "Just not anything weird," Leo said. Define weird," Marianne said, laughing. "You know, like olives, or that cheese that smells bad." "No olives, no smelly cheese." "Got it." She looked at me. "Julian, you're quiet this morning. Everything okay?" "Just thinking about a patient," I said, which was true. The patient was my marriage and the prognosis was terminal. "Well, try not to bring work stress to breakfast," she said gently. "These are the moments that matter. Family time." I nodded and drank my coffee and performed the role of husband, with the same precision I'd used to perform the role of psychiatrist for 30 years. 24 hours later, I stood outside Marianne's locked home office with my phone in one hand and the spare key in the other. She'd left at 9:30 for what she called a client meeting. I'd watched her drive away, waited 15 minutes, then walked to the door at the end of the second-floor hallway. Marianne's office had been locked for as long as I could remember. Privacy for client files, she'd said. Professional boundaries. I'd never questioned it, because psychiatrists understood professional boundaries. But eidetic memory is both gift and curse. It remembers the beautiful and the damning with equal precision, and it never, ever forgets. 7 years ago, Marianne had asked me to retrieve tax documents from her office. She'd been on a business trip, called me from some hotel, said the documents were in the filing cabinet, and she'd left the spare key in the second drawer of her desk underneath the manila folders. I'd gotten the documents, locked the office behind me, returned the key to the drawer. 7 years later, my hand remembered exactly where to reach. The key was still there underneath folders that had yellowed slightly with age. I unlocked the office door and stepped inside. The room smelled like Marianne's perfume and old paper. Desk filing cabinet bookshelf, small window overlooking the backyard. Everything organized with the same meticulous attention she gave to party planning. The filing cabinet had a separate lock. I tried the same key. It opened. I pulled out the first one. Marianne's handwriting, dates, dollar amounts. Initials that became full names halfway through my accounts to Meridian LLC to D. Vance, monthly entries, systematic, methodical. The financial architecture of a double life recorded with the same care most people use for recipe books. I opened the second notebook. More of the same. The third, the fourth. 11 notebooks. 11 years. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page. The camera click sounded loud in the quiet office, but my hands didn't shake. Each page took 5 seconds. Multiply by approximately 30 pages per notebook. Multiply by 11 notebooks. 27 minutes to document 11 years of systematic theft. 11 notebooks. 11 years. Dates, amounts, transfers, a systematic record Marianne kept with the same meticulous attention she gave to planning Leo's parties. I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, walked out of her office and closed the door. Then I sat in my car in the driveway and called the one person who could turn handwritten numbers into a prosecutable case. Celeste Mercer, around 40, answered on the second ring with the professional directness of a forensic accountant who had traced embezzlement through labyrinthine financial structures and knew that emotion slowed investigation. Mercer: I described my wife's 17-year betrayal the same way I would present a patient's case study to colleagues, emotionless, precise, focused on behavioral patterns rather than pain. My name is Julian Prescott. A colleague recommended you last year when he was handling a divorce case. I need a forensic accountant who specializes in systematic financial discrepancies. I'm listening, she said. I have photographic evidence of 11 years of handwritten financial records documenting transfers from joint accounts to what appears to be a parallel household. 17-year timeline. I need to know exact amounts, patterns, and whether this constitutes prosecutable fraud. Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that meant she was thinking. Is the joint accounts or separate? And she asked. Primarily joint. Some investment portfolios I manage, some she manages. I have password access to everything. Do you have 7 years of tax returns? Yes. The bank statements, credit card records, investment account, histories. With my dare. I can obtain all of it by tomorrow morning. Bring everything, she said. 7 years minimum, tax returns, bank statements, investment records, credit cards, business filings if there are any. Tomorrow 9 a.m. My office is in Uptown McKinney Avenue. I'll text you the address. How long will analysis take? Depends on complexity. If it's as systematic as you describe, I'll see patterns within 72 hours. Complete documentation, suitable for legal proceedings, 2 weeks, maybe 3. And your rate? $400 an hour, retainer of $10,000. Done. 30 years training patients to face their truth. And I'd never imagined I'd use those same clinical tools to dissect my own marriage like a case study in systematic deception. But here I was, hiring an expert witness before I'd confronted my wife building a prosecution, before I'd asked a single question about where she'd been at 4 a.m. Because I knew the answer, and I knew that answers without documentation were just stories, and stories could be denied. One more thing, Celeste said. Are you prepared for what I might find? Sometimes the numbers are worse than people expect. I'm prepared, I said. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. She hung up. I sat in the car and looked at my phone. 1 call, 3 minutes, $10,000 committed. The machinery of divorce had started moving. 2 days between the call and the electrician. 2 days of performing normalcy at breakfast while my mind cataloged every detail, every number, every name from 17 years I'd chosen not to examine too closely. 2 days of watching Marianne plan Leo's party with enthusiasm that would have seemed maternal if I didn't know she was planning another boy's 18th birthday party with equal care. Saturday morning, Floyd Harrington knocked at my door at 9 exactly. Floyd Harrington, 68, and weathered from decades of electrical work, stood on my porch with the unhurried confidence of a tradesman who knew urgency rarely helped and good work took the time it took. I'd scheduled him 2 weeks ago to upgrade the electrical panel in the basement routine maintenance I'd been postponing for months. Oh, morning, Dr. Prescott, he said, toolbox in hand. Floyd, thanks for coming on a Saturday. Time and a half, so thank you. He smiled. Panels in the basement. Through the kitchen door on the left. I brought him coffee 20 minutes later. He was on his back beneath the electrical box, testing connections with a multimeter. Appreciate it, he said, taking the mug without getting up. This panel's older than I thought. You're looking at a full replacement, not just an upgrade. How long? Today's just assessment and safe shutdown of the bad circuits. I'll order parts Monday, install next Saturday if they come in. That's fine. He sipped coffee and wiped his forehead with a rag from his pocket. My son Caleb, he does odd jobs on the side. Plumbing, basic carpentry, that kind of thing. Fixed a water pump middle of the night last week, Mrs. Vance's place house, number 7 end of the street. You know that property? I kept my face exactly as it had been. Mild interest, neighborly conversation. House number 7. I know that street, never been to the end of it. Nice place. Craftsman style, needs some work, but solid bones. Pump went out at midnight, she called Caleb in a panic. He had it running again by 2 a.m. Floyd laughed. Kid charges emergency rates, but he shows up, I'll give him that. Midnight plumbing emergency. That's dedication. Mrs. Vance seemed real grateful. Paid him in cash, tipped extra. I nodded and poured more coffee from the thermos I'd brought down. Casual, unhurried, a man making conversation with a tradesman on a Saturday morning. Your son available for other work? I asked Floyd. I've got some projects I keep putting off. Sure, I'll have him call you. Appreciate it. Floyd went back to work. I went upstairs and stood at the kitchen window, looking toward the end of Oak Lawn Avenue. Vance. The name sat in my memory with perfect clarity 3 years ago, Marianne on the phone in the garden, saying, I'll ask Vance about, then stopping when she saw me at the window. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now I knew Caleb Harrington had been inside, house number 7. He knew the layout, and I needed that information. I called Caleb Sunday morning and offered him 3 small jobs: bathroom faucet dripping stuck window in the guest room, loose boards on the front porch, legitimate work, fair price, and lunch afterward at the diner on Mockingbird Lane. The best intelligence comes from people who don't know they're giving it. This is what 30 years as a psychiatrist taught me about extracting truth from ordinary conversation. Caleb Harrington, around 30 and lean from constant work, arrived at noon with a canvas tool bag and the apologetic demeanor of someone who had learned to be careful about asking for things, but still showed up when called. He fixed the faucet in 20 minutes, freed the window in 15, replaced 3 porch boards in another 30. Good work, I said, inspecting the boards. Your father mentioned you stay busy. Busy enough, Caleb said. Helps that I'll take jobs, other guys won't, late nights, weekends, emergency calls. Let me buy you lunch. There's a place around the corner. He hesitated the way people do when they're not sure if the offer is genuine or obligatory. I insist, I said. It's past noon and you've been working since you got here. The diner was the kind with vinyl booths and laminated menus and coffee that came immediately in thick ceramic mugs. We sat in a corner booth. Caleb ordered a burger. I ordered the same, though I wasn't particularly hungry. Your father's been doing electrical work in this neighborhood for how long? I asked. 25 years, maybe more. He knows every panel between here and Oak Lawn. And you learned the trade from him. Some electrical, yeah, but I ended up doing more plumbing and carpentry. Fills a different niche. He smiled. Fewer people want to deal with other people's pipes. Can't imagine why, I said. He laughed. The tension in his shoulders dropped slightly. Good. People talked more when they were comfortable. The food came. I ate slowly and asked questions the way I'd been trained to ask them. Open-ended, genuinely curious, never pushing. Where did he learn carpentry? What kind of projects kept him busiest? Did he prefer residential or commercial? Caleb answered easily, warming to the subject. Older houses were his specialty. The ones built in the 20s and 30s with original plumbing and wiring that needed constant attention. Highland Park, University Park, Oak Lawn, he knew the neighborhoods better than the people who lived in them. How many times had I used these exact techniques? The strategic pause, the gentle probe, the empathetic nod to help patients reveal what they had been hiding from themselves. The skills translated perfectly. The only difference was that Caleb wasn't a patient, and I wasn't trying to help him. I was extracting reconnaissance from someone who had no idea he was being interviewed. Your father mentioned you do work all over this area, I said. Must keep you busy. Yeah, here and there. Older houses, you know. Always something breaking. He took a bite of his burger, chewed, swallowed. Like Mrs. Vance's place last week, utility rooms at the front of the house instead of the back makes the pipe runs twice as long as they should be. Water pump goes out, it floods the whole front room instead of just a closet. I kept my expression exactly where it had been, mild interest. nothing more. Oh, front of the house. That's unusual. Real unusual. Most craftsman-style houses from that era, utilities always in back near the kitchen. But whoever built that one must have had a reason. Problem is, when you need to run new water lines or fix drainage, you're working backwards the whole time. And sounds complicated. It is. Here, I'll show you. He pulled a pen from his jacket pocket and grabbed a paper napkin from the dispenser, drew a quick rectangle, added a door at the bottom. It's your front door here, he said, tapping the pen. Utility room, right here at the front, that's where the pump was. Kitchen's over here on the right side. 2 bedrooms and the back hallway runs between them. Back door leads to a garden. He drew as he talked simple lines, creating a floor plan that would have meant nothing to most people. To me, it was a map. The napkin diagram was crude, just a few quick lines explaining plumbing problems. But to me, it was a map to the center of Marianne's carefully constructed lie, drawn by someone who had no idea what he was handing me. Whole thing's backwards, Caleb continued. Makes everything harder, but the bones are solid. Good house just needs work. Mrs. Vance maintaining it herself, I asked. It seems like it. She called me direct, not through a property manager or anything. Paid cash, tipped good. Nice lady. I looked at the napkin. 2 bedrooms and back. Hallway between them. One of those rooms would be where Marianne kept the records she didn't keep at our house. The ones too dangerous to leave in her locked office where I had already been once and could go again. One of those back rooms held the other half of 17 years. You're right, I said. That layout doesn't make much sense. Never does with these old conversions. Someone probably added the utility later, put it where there was space instead of where it should go. He finished his burger and wiped his hands on another napkin. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that keeps me in business. People buy these old places thinking they're charming, then find out charming means expensive. Well, I appreciate you coming out on a Sunday, I said. The porch looks perfect. Anytime. Your place is easy compared to some of the jobs I get. I paid for lunch and walked him to his truck. He thanked me again, said to call if I needed anything else, drove away with his tool bag rattling in the passenger seat. Tomorrow morning, I would meet Celeste Mercer with 7 years of financial records. By tomorrow afternoon, I would know exactly how much money Marianne had taken, where it went, and what it bought. 25 minutes of silence can feel longer than 17 years of marriage when you're waiting to learn the price your wife put on your trust. Celeste Mercer's office occupied the 4th floor of a building on McKinney Avenue. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, 3 computer monitors arranged across a standing desk. She met me at the door at 9, exactly. Shook my hand once and gestured to the conference table. Everything, she asked. I opened the briefcase. Tax returns, 7 years, joint filings. Bank statements, checking savings, 3 investment accounts. Credit card records. Business incorporation documents for Meridian LLC. And my phone loaded with photographs of 11 handwritten notebooks documenting transfers I hadn't known existed. This is comprehensive, Celeste said, spreading the documents across the table with the systematic precision of someone who understood that financial deception always left patterns if you knew how to read them. She sat down, pulled reading glasses from her dark hair, and began. No small talk, no reassuring words about how this must be difficult. Just focused analysis pages turning with mechanical regularity while I sat across the table and watched someone perform an autopsy on my marriage. 5 minutes passed, then 10. She made notes in illegal pad numbers, dates occasional question marks. Her pen moved quickly, precisely the way a surgeon's scalpel moves when the anatomy is familiar and the pathology clear. 15 minutes. I'd brought coffee from the lobby cafe downstairs. Mine had gone cold in the paper cup. Celeste hadn't touched hers. 20 minutes. She opened my phone, scrolled through the photographs of Marianne's handwritten notebooks, zoomed in on specific entries, cross-referenced them against bank statements from the same months, made more notes. 25 minutes of absolute silence. The silence itself became information. If this had been simple, a few transfers in account I'd missed, Celeste would have said something by the 10-minute mark. Professional courtesy. Here's what I'm seeing. Let me explain the basics. We'll dig deeper later. But she wasn't explaining. She was building context, which meant the context was complicated enough to require complete understanding before she could translate it into language. I had sat through hundreds of hours of silence with patient strategic pauses designed to let them fill empty space with truth. But sitting on the other side of that silence, watching someone read the autopsy report of my marriage, was a different experience entirely. Every page Celeste turned felt like watching her excavate another layer of something I should have seen myself. Finally, she set down her pen, looked up. removed her reading glasses with the deliberate care of someone about to deliver a diagnosis. Your wife opened a Delaware limited liability company 11 years ago, Celeste said. Meridian Consulting Group. She is the sole member and registered agent. Delaware doesn't require public disclosure of LLC ownership, which is why you wouldn't have found it in standard searches. Consulting for what? Nothing. The LLC generates no revenue. It exists purely as a vehicle to receive and distribute funds. From where? From you. She turned her legal pad so I could see the numbers. Your joint investment account with Vanguard, the one you thought was for retirement, has been making quarterly transfers to Meridian since March 2014. The transfers are small enough not to trigger automatic notifications. 15,000 here, 20,000 there, spaced irregularly to avoid pattern recognition. How much total? Celeste looked at me with the flat professional affect of someone who had delivered bad news often enough to know that softening it didn't help. As of last Friday's account, reconciliation approximately $380,000. The number arrived without ceremony, delivered in Celeste's flat professional tone, as though she were reading a grocery receipt rather than documenting 17 years of systematic theft. $380,000. I sat with that number, let it settle. It was less than I'd feared and more than I'd wanted to believe. Not enough to bankrupt us. Enough to fund a comfortable parallel life for more than a decade. Where did it go? I asked. That's more complicated. Meridian has made transfers to multiple accounts. Some personal checking account registered to Marianne Prescott with a different bank you don't have access to. Some to other entities. I'll need another week to trace the complete flow. And the notebooks appear to be her personal ledger, tracking what she took, where she sent it, what it purchased. She kept meticulous records. Meticulous enough to prosecute, meticulous enough to convict, Celeste said. If you want to pursue criminal charges, the Delaware LLC registration is legal. The transfers from your joint account without your knowledge or consent, that's embezzlement. The question is what you want the outcome to be. I thought about Leo's Sweet 16 party, 3 weeks from now, 80 guests. Marianne planning every detail with stolen money she'd taken so carefully, I'd never noticed the accounts getting smaller. I want documentation that will hold up in family court, I said. Divorce, full custody, asset recovery, and I want it ready in 3 weeks. 3 weeks is fast. Can you do it? Yes. She made a note. I'll prioritize the marital asset analysis, document every transfer, every account, every entity. You'll have a complete forensic report suitable for legal proceedings. Is there anything else I should know? Celeste looked at me for a long moment. Then she turned to the next section of her notes. There's more, she said. $380,000 taken methodically over 11 years from accounts I thought we shared equally. The number should have been the shock, but what struck me harder was Celeste's expression when I asked if there was anything else. She turned to the next section of her notes with the careful deliberation of someone about to explain that the floor had collapsed and I was standing on air. Celeste turned the page in her notes with the deliberate slowness of someone who understood that the next revelation would be worse than the first. The money was almost secondary. What Marianne had actually stolen was my ability to know the money was missing. In 2014, Celeste said, your wife registered with the United States Postal Service as the sole authorized representative for all family mail. Not joint. Sole. Every bank statement, investment account, notice credit card, bill tax, document anything financial that comes to your address goes through her hands first. She slid a document across the table. USPS Form 1583, signed and notarized. Marianne's signature in blue ink, dated July 2014. And it's not just paper mail, Celeste continued. She registered as primary account administrator for your family email through your internet service provider. Same year. Every electronic statement, every notification from Vanguard or Chase or Amex, it hits her inbox first. She can read it forward, archive it, or delete it before you ever see anything. I looked at the form. Marianne's handwriting, the same careful loops she used to write grocery lists and birthday cards. How long has she had this level of access? 11 years, since 2014, the same year she opened the Delaware LLC. Not a coincidence. The architecture of long-term deception built with the precision of someone who understood that controlling money meant nothing if you couldn't control the information about the money. Information control is the foundation of every successful long-term deception. Not the lie itself, but the systematic management of what the target is permitted to see, creating reality from edited fragments. So every investment statement I've seen for the last 11 years could have been edited, Celeste said, or selectively forwarded. Or you saw legitimate statements that didn't show the transfers because she routed the money through accounts you don't monitor. The Vanguard account, our retirement fund, I receive quarterly statements. Do you receive what she forwards from the master account she controls? Celeste opened her laptop, turned it so I could see the screen. I pulled the original statements directly from Vanguard using the access credentials you provided. Here's what they sent to your address last quarter. Here's what hit your email inbox. 2 PDF files side by side. Same letterhead, same date, different numbers. The version I'd received showed our retirement account growing steadily. The version Vanguard had actually sent showed quarterly withdrawals that exactly matched the transfers to Meridian Consulting Group. She edited the PDFs, I said. Basic accounting software. Change the numbers, save as new PDF, forward the modified version. You see growth? Vanguard sees withdrawals. Nobody questions anything because the mail system itself is compromised. I sat back in my chair. My eidetic memory was already working, scrolling through 17 years of marriage with new context. Marianne at the kitchen table one evening, sorting through a stack of envelopes. "You're so busy with your patients," she'd said. "Let me handle all the financial paperwork. I'll organize everything, make sure bills get paid on time, keep track of statements. You focus on what you do best." I'd looked at the pile of unopened mail bank statements, investment reports, credit card bills, and felt relief. "Are you sure?" I'd asked. "Completely. I'm home more than you anyway. It makes sense." I'd said yes, grateful, trusting. I remembered that conversation with photographic clarity. Marianne's smile, the afternoon light through the kitchen window, my relief at delegating something tedious. And I understood I was remembering the moment I handed her the keys to my own blindness. "You're thinking about when she offered," Celeste said, reading my expression with the accuracy of someone who'd watched this realization land on other faces before. "Summer 2014. She volunteered to handle all the paperwork. I thought she was being helpful. She was being strategic. She knew that if you weren't seeing raw data, she could control the narrative. And she knew you'd say yes because delegating financial administration to a spouse is normal, reasonable, the kind of thing functional marriages do. How many couples do this? Plenty. Most of them aren't embezzling, but the ones who are, they always start with information control. You can't steal money from someone who's watching the accounts. You can steal from someone who trusts you to watch the accounts for them. I thought about my patients, the ones who describe relationships where reality seemed to shift, where their memory of events conflicted with their partner's version, where proof somehow never materialized when they needed it. Gaslighting, we called it, in psychiatric literature, systematic reality distortion. But this was more sophisticated. Marianne hadn't argued with my memory. She'd prevented me from forming accurate memories in the first place by controlling what information I was allowed to access. I trusted her with the entire flow of information in my life, I said. That wasn't trust. That was a blind spot she created and I volunteered to maintain. Celeste closed her folder. "It's for what it's worth," she said. "You're not the first intelligent person to be deceived this way. Information asymmetry is powerful. When one person controls what the other person sees, reality becomes whatever the controller decides it is. Can you document all of this? Already am. The USPS registration. The email administration logs the statement comparison. It'll all be in my report. A family court judge will understand exactly what she did and why you didn't catch it sooner. How long for the complete analysis? 2 weeks, maybe less. I'll trace every dollar from your accounts through Meridian and out to wherever it ended up. You'll have a comprehensive forensic report with exhibits suitable for legal proceedings." Celeste closed the folder and looked at me with the expression of someone who had delivered difficult news before and knew the impact took time to land fully. "That's everything I can tell you from paper records," she said. "If you want to know where the money actually went and what it bought, you'll need digital forensics, cloud accounts, deleted files, location data, the kind of evidence that lives in backups and thinks it's been erased." I stood up, shook her hand. "Thank you," I said. "Call me if you find anything else. And Julian," she paused, "whatever you're planning for 3 weeks from now, make sure you have legal counsel present. What you've described sounds like public confrontation. Those can go sideways fast." "I'll keep that in mind." I walked to my car and sat in the driver's seat with the engine off. I had a tech specialist to call and exactly one place to start looking our family cloud account that Marianne had set up years ago for convenience. I drove home and called a tech specialist Celeste had recommended. Remote work, cash payment, No questions about why I needed deleted files recovered from a cloud account I had full legal access to. Tuesday evening, the results arrived by encrypted email. Digital forensics recovered 43 photographs Marianne thought she'd deleted forever. What she didn't understand was that deleted and gone are not the same thing. I sat in my home office with the door locked and opened the first file. Miami, the Fontainebleau Hotel, May 2023. Marianne standing on a balcony overlooking the ocean, wearing a sundress I'd never seen. Smiling. Dominic beside her with his arm around her waist. Kieran in the foreground making a peace sign at the camera, teenage enthusiasm captured in high resolution. The metadata was intact. EXIF data embedded in the image file like a confession written in code only forensic software could read. Date May 14th, 2023, 6:47 p.m. GPS coordinates 25.8209 degrees, north 80.119, 4 degrees west. Miami Beach, Florida. Device iPhone 12 Pro, registered to Marianne Prescott. May 2023. Conference season. I remembered her packing a carry-on, kissing my cheek, saying she'd be at an accounting software summit in Chicago. Not Chicago. Miami. $600 a night at the Fontainebleau, while I thought she was attending professional development sessions. Yes, I opened the next photo. New Orleans, French Quarter, November 2022. The three of them at a restaurant table, outdoor seating, wrought iron balcony visible in the background. Wine glasses, seafood platters, the kind of expensive dinner that showed up on credit card statements as business meals. EXIF data, November 8th, 2022. GPS 29.9584 degrees, north 90.0, 644 degrees west. New Orleans, Louisiana, November 2022. She'd said Dallas Property Management Conference, $550 a night at a French Quarter boutique hotel. I kept opening files. The cloud is the perfect witness. It records everything with inhuman precision, stores it beyond reach of guilt or second thoughts, and delivers it back years later with timestamps that don't lie and GPS coordinates that can't be argued with. Santa Fe, Phoenix, Charleston, Savannah. 11 years of vacations documented in high-resolution images with metadata that formed a GPS-tracked timeline of systematic deception. Each photo corresponded to a week Marianne had told me she was traveling for work, professional conferences, client meetings, Meridian LLC business development. Each photo showed her with Dominic and Kieran at resorts that cost more per night than most people spent on entire vacations. And each photo had been carefully deleted from the family cloud account, removed from the visible albums, sent to the trash folder, and permanently erased. Except nothing is permanently erased. The cloud keeps backup copies in hidden directories. Recovery software finds them. And deleted files from 6 months ago or 6 years ago come back with the same clarity they had the day they were taken. I reached photo number 37. Sedona, Arizona. Red rock formations in the background, dramatic sunset lighting. Marianne and Dominic sitting on a resort patio. Kieran holding up a margarita glass with a theatrical grimace, the caption, "Moment before, he tasted it," visible in his expression. EXIF data loaded. Date March 15th, 2025, 7:23 p.m. GPS 34.8697 degrees, north 111.76, 10 degrees west. Sedona, Arizona. March. Last March. My eidetic memory pulled the dates immediately. March 14th to 17th. Leo had the flu. Not the regular kind, the severe kind that sent his fever to 103 degrees, and had me calling the pediatrician at midnight. Marianne had been scheduled to attend an accounting software conference in Boston. She'd left Thursday morning, returned Monday evening. 4 days. I remembered that weekend with a clarity eidetic memory provides. Leo's hot forehead against my palm at 2 a.m., measuring fever every 3 hours. The pediatrician's callback at dawn saying to bring him in if it didn't break by noon. The relief when the fever finally broke on day 3 the Sunday afternoon. Leo exhausted but smiling for the first time in 72 hours. I remembered all of it, and I remembered it alone. Because Marianne had been in Sedona, not Boston, not a conference. $500 a night at a Red Rock resort with Dominic and Kieran, while I sat in Leo's bedroom at 3 in the morning with a damp washcloth and a thermometer counting hours until the fever medication could be redosed. I opened the next Sedona photo. March 16th, 2025, 10:14 a.m. The three of them on a hiking trail. Marianne's hair pulled back, athletic clothes, genuine smile. The kind of smile I used to see directed at me 20 years ago and hadn't seen in our house in longer than I wanted to calculate. March 16th. That was the day the pediatrician had me bring Leo in for a throat culture, strep test, blood work to rule out complications. I'd driven him to the clinic alone, held his hand during the blood draw, brought him home, and set him up on the couch with movies and soup. Marianne had texted that afternoon. Conference sessions running long, hope Leo feels better. Love you both. She'd been on a hiking trail in Arizona. I closed the laptop, stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the October darkness. 43 photos spanning 11 years. Miami, New Orleans, Sedona, Charleston, Phoenix, Santa Fe. Luxury resorts with GPS coordinates and timestamps that would stand up in any courtroom. Each one taken during a week, Marianne claimed to be building her career. Each one proving she'd been building something else entirely. The money Celeste had traced the transfers to Meridian, the systematic withdrawals, this was where it went. Not just to house number 7, not just to maintaining Dominic and Kieran. To this, to family vacations with her real family, while I worked 60-hour weeks and raised our son and believed the lie about professional development. I sat back down at the desk, opened my phone, searched for attorneys in Dallas who specialized in high-asset divorce and financial fraud, not a divorce lawyer. I needed someone who understood that what I was holding wasn't just evidence of infidelity. It was documentation of sustained financial fraud, systematic embezzlement, and the kind of calculated deception that required more than a settlement. It required consequences. Wednesday morning, I called 3 law firms. The first 2 asked if I wanted mediation. The third, Sterling Blackwell's office on Main Street, asked how much documentation I had and whether I was prepared for litigation. I had an appointment by noon. The first question Sterling Blackwell asked wasn't about the money or the photographs. It was about what documents I had signed. Sterling Blackwell, 55 and silver-haired, moved with the deliberate patience of someone who understood that litigation was won in preparation, not performance. His office occupied the 12th floor with a view of downtown Dallas that suggested his hourly rate matched the real estate. I spread everything across his conference table. Celeste's forensic report documenting the Delaware LLC and systematic transfers. 43 geotagged photographs showing luxury vacations during weeks. Marianne claimed professional conferences. 11 years of handwritten notebooks with dates and amounts in Marianne's careful script. Sterling looked at it all without touching anything. Comprehensive, he said. Before we discuss strategy, did you sign any financial planning documents, estate agreements, or marital property instruments at any point during your marriage? The question landed with the precision of someone who already suspected the answer. My eidetic memory pulled the moment immediately. 2010, I said. Leo was a few months old. I was exhausted from infant care. Marianne presented a stack of papers she described as professional malpractice protection for my psychiatric practice. Said it would shield our personal assets if I ever faced a lawsuit. I signed without having a lawyer review it. Do you remember what it was called? Marital Asset Protection Agreement, something like that. Sterling turned to his computer and began typing. County Clerk Records Public Filing Database. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard with the efficiency of someone who had searched these records hundreds of times. 3 minutes of silence. Then he stopped. It's found it, he said. Dallas County Clerk Records filed April 2011. Postnuptial agreement, 15 pages. Your signature is registered and notarized. I remembered signing those papers. Leo crying in the next room, my hand cramping from exhaustion, Marianne's reassuring voice about protecting my practice. And I understood that moment of trust had been the cornerstone of 17 years of systematic deception. What does it say? Sterling opened the digital file, read in silence for 2 minutes. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted slightly the way a chess player's does when they see the opponent has made a critical error. It's well constructed, he said. Designates all Meridian LLC assets as your wife's separate property, not subject to division in divorce proceedings. Essentially, she built a legal fortress around the money she was stealing. Everything she put into that Delaware account would be protected from asset distribution. So she wins. No. Sterling turned the screen so I could see it. Read Clause 7, page 9. I leaned forward. Clause 7, faithfulness and good faith provisions. In the event that either party engages in gross financial fraud, systematic deception regarding marital assets, or actions causing significant financial harm to the spouse, all separate property designations contained herein shall be rendered void and unenforceable. Assets shall revert to standard Texas community property statutes for equitable distribution. I read it twice. She wrote her own escape clause, I said. She drafted this herself, Sterling said. No private attorney involved, I can tell from the language and formatting. She used an online legal form, probably one of the premium services that charges a few $100s for customizable templates. The base form includes faithfulness clauses as standard provisions to make agreements appear balanced and fair. She included it without understanding what it meant. She included it because legitimate post-nuptial agreements require good faith provisions. If she'd left it out, any lawyer reviewing the document would have flagged it as one-sided. So she copied the standard clause, modified it slightly to reference financial fraud instead of just infidelity, and signed it. Legal documents are architecture. They protect what you build inside them, but only if the foundation is solid and the walls have no cracks. Marianne had built a fortress with a self-destruct button embedded in the blueprints. Can we prove gross financial fraud? Sterling asked. Celeste documented over $380,000 in systematic transfers over 11 years. The notebooks show deliberate tracking. The photographs prove she was spending it on luxury vacations while claiming business expenses. That's probably sufficient, but family court judges are cautious about voiding prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. We'll need to exceed the standard. Show not just financial fraud, but sustained calculated deception that demonstrates bad faith. The Delaware LLC registration, the mail control she established in 2014, the edited bank statements, the parallel household 400 meters from our home. All good, but here's what would make this ironclad. Sterling pulled up a legal pad and made notes as he talked. First, biological proof. If Kieran Vance is her child, DNA. Evidence establishes she maintained a secret family, not just an affair. Second, physical evidence of dual life. Jewelry, property documents, anything showing she was living as though she had two families simultaneously. How do I get DNA legally? Wanderstrup, de Korf, and Bios. Abandoned property doctrine. If Kieran discards something in a public place with his DNA on it, cup, napkin, cigarette, you can collect it. Chain of custody matters for court, so document everything. Time, date, location, photographs of collection. And physical evidence. That's harder. You can't break into house number 7. But if she bought significant items, rings for example, there would be records, credit card statements, jeweler receipts. Celeste might find those in the financial analysis. Sterling closed the document and looked at me with something approaching professional satisfaction. This clause gives us everything, he said. If we can prove the fraud, I already had systematic transfers, geotagged photographs, and 11 years of handwritten documentation. What I didn't have was biological proof that Kieran was Marianne's child, and I didn't have physical evidence of the dual life she'd been maintaining. Sterling's next words confirmed what I was already thinking. You'll need DNA and something tangible, he said. Jewelry documents, anything that proves she was living as though she had two families simultaneously. Get me that, and Clause 7 voids her entire legal protection. Sterling's instructions were clear. DNA from abandoned property in a public place. Physical evidence of dual life. Chain of custody documentation for everything. I started Thursday morning. Collecting evidence legally requires patience and precision. Two qualities 30 years of psychiatric practice taught me to apply without emotion interfering with observation. The convenience store sat 3 blocks from house number 7, corner location, with outdoor seating. I parked across the street at 7:45 Thursday morning and waited. 8:30. Kieran Vance walked up. 18 years old. Marianne's height, her jawline visible even at this distance. He went inside, came out 2 minutes later with an energy drink and a breakfast sandwich. Sat on the outdoor bench. Ate the sandwich, drank half the energy drink, checked his phone. 8:45. He stood up, tossed the can in the public trash receptacle, and walked back toward house number 7. I waited 15 minutes. Then I walked to the trash can, retrieved the energy drink can with gloved hands, and placed it in a labeled evidence bag. Photographed the collection with my phone, time-stamp location chain of custody. Friday morning, same routine. 8:30 arrival, same bench, same brand of energy drink. 8:45 departure can left in the public trash. Pattern established. Surveillance is meditation for psychiatrists. Hours of patient observation, waiting for the pattern to reveal itself, the repeated behavior that becomes evidence when documented with enough precision to withstand cross-examination. Friday at 8:50, I collected the second can. Also photographed Marianne's coffee cup from our kitchen that morning after she'd left for a meeting. 2 samples, potential mother and potential son. Sealed, labeled, documented. The private laboratory Celeste recommended was in Richardson, north of Dallas. Discreet, professional, accustomed to handling sensitive paternity and maternity cases for legal proceedings. The lab technician took the samples without questions. Maternity analysis, I said. Court admissibility required. It's 7 to 10 business days, she said. We'll call when results are ready. I drove back to Highland Park and went to work. Friday afternoon, I had 3 patient sessions scheduled. I conducted them with the same clinical precision I'd used to collect DNA, evidence compartmentalizing personal devastation, into a space that wouldn't interfere with professional obligations. At 2:30, I canceled my remaining appointments and drove to uptown Dallas. Whitfield Jewelers occupied a corner storefront on McKinney Avenue, high-end, the kind of place where engagement rings started at 5 figures, and anniversary pieces came with certificates of authenticity. Garrett Whitfield, the jewelry store manager in his early 50s, greeted me at the door with the practiced ease of someone who loved his craft and took pride in remembering significant commissions. "Good afternoon," he said. "How can I help you today?" "I'm considering a significant anniversary piece for my wife," I said. "Our 20th is coming up. I'd like to see examples of your previous custom work." "Absolutely. Let me pull some samples." He led me to a private consultation room, brought out a leather portfolio of photographs showing previous commissions. Rings, necklaces, bracelets. Each piece documented with specifications and customer testimonials. "Do you have examples of matching pieces?" I asked. "Something that shows your ability to create identical work." "Oh, certainly." Garrett opened a file drawer, pulled out a folder. "Let me show you. Here's a good one." He spread papers on the table between us. Invoice, design sketches, final photographs. I looked at the invoice. Date September 14th, 2021. Item 1, custom gold band specifications detailed. Payment joint checking account, last 4 digits matching the account I shared with Marianne. Amount $4,300. Item 2, custom gold band identical specifications. Payment business account, last 4 digits I didn't recognize but suspected match Meridian LLC. Amount $4,300. Total $8,600. She requested the exact same inscription inside both rings. Garrett continued oblivious to what he was showing me. Very romantic. Some clients do that when they renew vows or want matching anniversary bands. The receipt in Garrett's hand showed 2 line items, same amount, same date, different payment sources. And I understood Marianne had given Dominic the same symbol she'd given me, made the same vow, commissioned the same inscription, as though one of us was practice and one was real. "Beautiful work," I said, my voice steady, professional, interested. "The inscription is that something you typically recommend?" "We offer it as an option." Mrs. Carter knew exactly what she wanted, very specific about making them identical. I looked at the photographs. 2 gold bands indistinguishable. The kind of rings that symbolized commitment, fidelity, permanent bond. She'd bought 2, same day. One with money from our joint account, one with money stolen from that account, and laundered through the Delaware LLC. "This is exactly the kind of craftsmanship I'm looking for," I said. "Could I think about it over the weekend and get back to you?" "Of course. Here's my card. Feel free to call anytime." I shook his hand, thanked him, walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. 2 identical rings, same inscription, same date, one paid with our joint account, one with money stolen from that same account, and funneled through Meridian LLC. I didn't ask Garrett what the inscription said. I didn't want to know tonight. Maybe I'd never want to know. The fact that it existed, that Marianne had commissioned matching symbols of commitment for 2 men simultaneously, was enough. In 10 days, I would have DNA confirmation that Kieran was her biological son. I already had Celeste's financial forensics documenting systematic theft. I had 43 geotagged photographs proving luxury vacations during claimed business trips. I had Sterling's discovery of the self-destructing post-nuptial agreement. I had handwritten notebooks in Marianne's own script, tracking every stolen dollar. And now I had physical proof that she hadn't just maintained 2 households. She'd symbolically married 2 men. What I didn't have yet was the complete picture of where all the money went. Monday morning, Celeste was going to show me exactly what Marianne bought with 17 years of systematic theft. Celeste was waiting with the final section of her forensic report. $76,000 stolen from a 16-year-old's college fund to buy a sports car for a man who hasn't worked in over a decade. This is where numbers stopped being abstract and became moral crime. That last item, Celeste said, opening a file marked Leo Prescott Education Account. You opened this when Leo was 3 years old, 2012. Regular contributions documented in tax records 2,000 annually, sometimes more. Conservative investment strategy appropriate for college savings. What gets that's current balance? 18,000. I did the math immediately. 13 years of contributions. Basic compound interest in a conservative portfolio. It should be 94,000, I said. 94,200, Celeste confirmed. Give or take a few hundred for market fluctuation. The difference is $76,000 withdrawn systematically over 6 years. She slid account statements across the desk. Highlighted entries showing withdrawals between $8,000 and $15,000. Small enough to avoid automatic fraud alerts. Large enough to fund significant purchases. And the trail goes where everything else goes, she said. Leo's custodial account to Meridian LLC to Dominic Vance's personal checking account. When was the most recent withdrawal? 3 weeks ago, $12,000. 3 weeks ago, mid-September. Leo had just started his junior year of high school, already thinking about colleges, asking about application deadlines, wondering if his education fund would cover tuition at the schools he wanted. I had stayed professionally calm through systematic theft, through vacation photos, and dual rings through every revelation Celeste delivered. But my son's college fund stolen to buy a car for the man who'd been living on Leo's future was the number that made my hands flatten on the desk to keep them steady. What did the $12,000 buy? I asked. I cross-referenced the withdrawal date with Dominic's account activity. She turned her laptop screen. Bank memo from Dominic Vance's checking account dated 3 weeks ago. Payment to luxury automotive dealership Dallas. $12,000. A car, I said. Down payment on a sports car based on the dealership. I can't access what he bought without a subpoena, but the timing matches exactly. Marianne had taken money meant for Leo's education and bought her unemployed lover a car. Not an emergency medical expense. Not something approaching necessity. A sports car. How long has Dominic been unemployed? I asked. No W-2 income in the tax returns I've reviewed going back 11 years. He might do occasional cash work, but no documented employment since at least 2014. 11 years. Marianne had been funding his entire life while I worked 60-hour weeks, and she told me she was building Meridian LLC into a legitimate business. This completes my analysis, Celeste said. Total documented theft, approximately $380,000 over 11 years, plus $76,000 from Leo's account. $456,000 total. The post-nuptial agreements clause, 7 should void based on this level of systematic fraud. You'll have everything you need for family court. Thank you, I said. Sterling mentioned you're planning something for Leo's birthday party. I am. Just make sure you have legal counsel present. Public confrontations can become evidence against you if they're not handled correctly. Noted. I drove home and sat in the car outside my house for 20 minutes before going inside. Marianne's car was in the driveway. She was home probably planning Leo's party with the same meticulous attention she'd given to planning 17 years of systematic deception. Tuesday evening, my phone rang while I was sitting in the same car in the same spot. I'd developed the habit of taking certain calls outside where Marianne couldn't overhear. Walter Prescott, my father. 82 years old and a former Texas state judge, he spoke with the calm authority of someone who had spent 30 years reading defendants and witnesses from the bench and knew when his own son needed support without requiring explanation. "Are you well, Julian?" he asked. No preamble, no small talk, just the question that mattered. "I'm managing," I said. Silence for 3 seconds, then, "I know something's going on. I don't need to know what yet, but I've already called Sterling Blackwell. Whatever you need, I'm prepared to help." My father spent 30 years on the bench reading defendants, witnesses, lawyers, learning to see guilt and truth beneath performed composure. And he'd read me over the phone in under 30 seconds, despite 17 years of practice hiding what I felt from everyone, including myself. "Yeah, how did you know?" I asked. "Your voice when we talked last month. The way you asked about Texas family law. Small things. I'm your father, I notice." "Leo's birthday party," I said. 10 days from now. Will you be there?" I'll be there, Walter said. I'm always there. It's going to be different from what Marianne's planning. I assumed as much. Sterling mentioned you've been gathering documentation. That's the right approach. Evidence first, confrontation second. Your mother would have been proud of how you're handling this. My mother had died 6 years ago. Cancer. She'd loved Marianne, welcomed her into the family, never suspected anything was wrong. Part of me was grateful she wasn't alive to see this. Thank you, I said. Do you need me to do anything before the party? Borst. Just be there. That's enough. Then I'll be there. He hung up. I sat in the car looking at the house where my wife was probably arranging flowers or reviewing catering menus for a party she thought would celebrate our son's 16th birthday. She had no idea that party would instead document the end of 17 years of lies. My father was a judge for 30 years. He reads people the way I read patient case files with precision that doesn't require explanation to understand guilt, pain, or determination. If he said he'd be at Leo's party, he wasn't just confirming attendance. He was confirming readiness. In 7 days, DNA results would arrive. In 10 days, Leo would turn 16 at a party. Walter, Celeste, Sterling, and I all knew would be something very different from what Marianne was planning. Wednesday arrived like every other day. Marianne making breakfast. Leo complaining about calculus homework. Me drinking coffee and observing everything with the clinical detachment of someone who knew exactly how many days remained until the performance ended. 6 days until Leo's party. The lab technician's voice was carefully neutral when she called at 2:07 p.m. Dr. Prescott, your paternity test results are ready. The maternity marker you requested shows 99.97% probability. Shall I email the full report, or would you prefer to discuss the findings? I was between patient sessions. My office door was closed. Email is fine, I said. Send it now. Sending. My phone chimed 30 seconds later. PDF attachment. I opened it. Combined maternity index 3,847.62. Probability of maternity 99.97%. Conclusion. The alleged mother cannot be excluded as the biological mother of the tested child. The probability of maternity is 99.97%, as compared to an untested, unrelated individual. 16 genetic markers tested, 16 matches. Kieran Matthew Vance, born March 14th, 2008, was biologically Marianne's son, 99.97%. In my profession, we speak of diagnostic certainty, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression, clinical diagnoses based on symptom clusters and behavioral patterns, always with some margin for diagnostic revision. But this was a different kind of diagnosis. I sat at my desk holding my phone, looking at genetic data that transformed 18 years of suspicion into scientific fact. Kieran Matthew Vance, March 14th, 2008. 17 years, 9 months, and 3 days of deception. Now confirmed by 16 genetic markers and a probability that left no room for doubt. I had spent 28 years diagnosing disorders of the mind, parsing the difference between narcissistic personality disorder and sociopathy, between borderline tendencies and bipolar mania. But sitting with that DNA report, I understood that Marianne's pathology wasn't in any DSM category. This was sustained calculated deception, executed with the patience of someone who believed she would never face consequences. The clinical term was antisocial traits with Machiavellian features. The human term was simpler. She had looked me in the eye for 18 years and lied without hesitation. I forwarded the report to Sterling Blackwell with a single-line DNA confirmation attached, 99.97% probability. Then I called in my next patient and spent 50 minutes helping someone process anxiety about job performance, while I processed the genetic proof that my marriage had been a performance from the beginning. Before I tell you what the forged signature truly meant, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think I should confront Marianne now, or B, if I should wait for the party. Add Y, in 5 to 10 words. Please note, what follows contains recreated details for narrative purposes, but the lesson is what matters. If dramatized elements aren't for you, this is a good place to stop. Thursday morning at 10, Celeste appeared at my office door with a manila folder. I found something that changes everything, she said. I let her in, locked the door behind her. She spread documents across my desk, bank paperwork, loan applications, signature pages. The HELOC for house number 7, she said. The 120 that bought the property outright in 2019. I got the original application documents from the bank yesterday. $120,000. Home equity line of credit, March 2019. My signature at the bottom of the application. Except it wasn't my signature. Look at the capital P in Prescott, Celeste said, placing a genuine signature beside it. Yours has a distinct loop. This one is angular. The baseline slant is different. The pen pressure varies. She was right. I'd signed my name thousands of times. Hospital admissions, prescription pads, legal documents, insurance forms. I knew my own signature the way I knew my own face. This wasn't it. The date is March 2019, Celeste continued. I checked your calendar records from your office manager. You were in Austin that week. Dallas Psychiatric Association Annual Conference. March 2019. I remembered that conference. 3 days of continuing education seminars. I'd presented a paper on treatment-resistant depression. I hadn't been in Dallas to sign anything. She forged my signature, I said. On a federal bank document, Celeste said. For $120,000. This isn't embezzlement anymore. This is bank fraud, identity theft, federal crimes. Does Sterling know? I called his office this morning. He says with this plus the DNA evidence, we're not talking about civil asset recovery. We're talking about criminal referrals to the FBI and the Texas Attorney General. I placed the forged signature next to a check I'd signed that morning. 2 versions of my name side by side. One genuine one, counterfeit. My hand was steady. In 6 days at Leo's Sweet 16 party, I would present these documents to a room full of witnesses. The DNA proof, the forged HELOC, the full accounting of 17 years and $4.2 million in systematic fraud. Marianne would stand there believing she was celebrating my son's birthday. She would leave understanding she had just attended the opening exhibit of her own prosecution. What happens now? I asked. Sterling wants to meet tomorrow morning. You, him, and your father if Walter's available. He needs to coordinate the legal strategy before the party. Once you present this evidence publicly, federal prosecutors won't have a choice about opening an investigation. Federal prison, I said. Potentially. Bank fraud carries sentences. Identity theft adds more. And she used your professional credentials in the application. You're a physician with substantial assets which made the loan approval easier. She defrauded the bank using your identity and reputation. I looked at the forged signature, Marianne's attempt to replicate my handwriting, close enough to fool a bank officer reviewing hundreds of applications, not close enough to fool forensic analysis. Thank you, I said. Celeste gathered the documents. Sterling will call you this afternoon to confirm tomorrow's meeting time. She left. I sat at my desk and thought about house number 7, purchased outright with $120,000 obtained through forgery. Dominic Vance living there rent-free for 6 years while I paid the mortgage on our Highland Park home. My phone rang at 3:15. Sterling's voice was measured but carried urgency I hadn't heard before. Your father and I need to meet with you tomorrow morning, he said. 9 a.m. my office. With the forged HELOC, we're now looking at federal charges. Bank fraud, wire fraud, possibly identity theft. The Sweet 16 party is 6 days away, Julian. We need to finalize every detail of how this goes down, because once you present this evidence publicly, the FBI will have no choice but to open an investigation. Friday morning, I told Marianne I had meetings downtown. She was planning Leo's party menu with the caterer and barely looked up when I left. I drove to Sterling's office carrying nothing but my phone and the knowledge that in 5 days everything would be different. 3 manila folders lay across Sterling Blackwell's mahogany conference table Friday afternoon. Financial forensics, behavioral documentation, legal grounds, each thick enough to end a marriage and start a prosecution. Sterling sat at the head of the table, Celeste to his right, Walter to his left. My father had arrived before me 82 years old and sitting with the same upright posture he'd maintained on the bench for 3 decades. I took the remaining chair. Let's review what we have, Sterling said, opening the first folder. Celeste, start with the financial analysis. Celeste pulled out her summary report, single-page bullet points numbers that told the story of 17 years in clean professional language. $380,000 in systematic embezzlement from joint accounts to Delaware, LLC to Dominic Vance, she said. $120,000 HELOC obtained through forged signature federal bank fraud. $76,000 from Leo's education fund. Total documented theft, $456,000. Timeline 2008 to present. Pattern consistent methodical, designed to avoid detection. Sterling nodded. The financial dossier alone voids the post-nuptial under Clause 7, but we're not stopping there. He opened the second folder, Behavioral Documentation. Of 43 geotagged photographs from deleted cloud storage, he said, luxury resort vacations during claimed business conferences, 2 identical rings commissioned same day, same inscription, DNA confirmation, 99.97% probability that Kieran Vance is Marianne's biological child. Witness statements from Caleb Harrington regarding house number 7. Mail control registration giving Marianne sole access to financial documents since 2014. The behavioral evidence establishes sustained deception, Celeste added. Not just financial fraud, but systematic creation of parallel family structure. Sterling opened the third folder. Legal grounds, he said. Post-nuptial voidance under fraud exception. Emergency custody transfer based on education's fund theft, demonstrating parental unfitness. Asset freeze and recovery, and criminal referrals. He pulled out a document I recognized. Federal letterhead. FBI seal. I've already drafted the referral paperwork, Sterling said. Bank fraud, wire fraud, identity theft. Once you present this evidence at the party. Sunday I file Monday morning, divorce petition, emergency custody motion, asset preservation order, and this formal notification to the FBI Dallas field office and Texas Attorney General. I had diagnosed hundreds of patients who believed their secrets were safe, the embezzler who thought his accounting was too clever, the adulterer who thought her alibis were airtight. They all shared one trait they underestimated the moment when hidden things become visible. Marianne had spent 17 years perfecting her lies. She had 4 days left. Timeline, I asked. Sunday afternoon, Leo's party, you present the evidence publicly, Sterling said. Monday morning at 9, I walk into Dallas County Family Court and file everything simultaneously. By Monday afternoon, Marianne will have been served with divorce papers, emergency custody orders, and asset freeze documentation. By Tuesday, federal prosecutors will have the criminal referral. And Leo, Walter asked, his first words since I'd arrived. Emergency custody hearing scheduled for the following week, Sterling said. Given the education fund theft, Judge Brennan will likely grant temporary custody to Julian pending full hearing. Leo's 16 old enough for his preference to carry significant weight. I looked at my father. He met my eyes with the calm authority of someone who'd spent 30 years watching justice unfold in courtrooms. One perfect day, I said. Leo's party. I want him to have one last day where he believes his family is intact. Then Monday morning it ends? Agreed, Sterling said. Walter nodded. The meeting lasted another hour. We reviewed contingencies, Marianne's likely legal responses, custody arrangements, asset valuation, the mechanics of federal prosecution. By the time I left, every detail had been planned with the precision of a surgical procedure. Saturday evening, I sat at the dining room table while Marianne presented Leo with printed party plans. The country club confirmed Sunday at 2 p.m. She said animated and cheerful in a way that would have seemed maternal if I didn't know she'd stolen Leo's college fund 3 weeks ago. Outdoor pavilion white tent set up seating for 40 guests. The band is perfect Leo. They do current hits and classic rock. And the menu has your favorites, brisket sliders, truffle mac and cheese, that chocolate torte you love. Leo looked at the printed menu with the mild embarrassment teenagers feel when their parents care too much. Mom, it's just a birthday, he said. You don't have to do all this. You turned 16 once, Marianne said, touching his hand with genuine maternal warmth. Your father and I want it to be perfect. Right, Julian? Absolutely perfect, I said. Leo looked between us. Something in his expression shifted the awareness teenagers develop when they sense adults performing rather than being honest. Is this your special or something? He asked. You both seem different. Marianne's smile didn't waver. Every year with you is special, sweetheart, she said. But 16, this is the most special ever. I drank my coffee and said nothing. Marianne continued describing the party, guest list, seating arrangements, the photographer she'd hired, the custom cake. Every detail funded by money she'd systematically stolen over 17 years, likely including recent withdrawals from the education account she'd been draining to buy Dominic luxury items. I lifted my coffee cup and met Marianne's eyes across the table. She smiled at me with genuine warmth, believing I was her partner in creating Leo's perfect day. In 96 hours, she would understand what perfect really meant. Leo excused himself after dinner to finish homework. Marianne cleared the table, humming something cheerful. I went to my office and closed the door. I texted back, "What time?" "Walter, 8 a.m. Your house. Just us." "Confirmed," I replied. Tomorrow morning, my father would arrive with something he thought Leo needed to know before the party. Tomorrow afternoon, 40 guests would gather to celebrate Leo's 16th birthday. And Monday morning, Sterling would file paperwork that would dismantle Marianne's entire life with the same methodical precision she'd used to build her lies. Walter arrived at 7:30 Sunday morning, 90 minutes before Marianne typically woke on weekends. He stood in my kitchen wearing a charcoal suit despite the casual hour, holding a leather portfolio that looked older than Leo. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "Nothing yet." He set the portfolio on the counter. But when I visited last Christmas, Leo asked me what I'd do if someone I trusted lied about something important. Said it was hypothetical. I told him the truth matters more than the relationship we think we have, because a relationship built on lies isn't real. I poured coffee with hands that didn't shake. "He suspects something. He's your son. He inherited your eyes." Walter touched my shoulder once briefly. "After today's party, when this explodes, he'll remember I said that. It'll help." Leo found me in the study at 4 that afternoon, still wearing his birthday shirt, white Oxford sleeves rolled to his elbows. The party had ended an hour ago. 40 guests had sung to him. Marianne had cried happy tears cutting the cake. "Dad, does Mom have money problems?" I looked up from papers I wasn't actually reading. "Why would you ask that?" "She's been weird about my college fund. Last month I asked about the balance and she changed the subject 3 times. He sat in the chair across from me, the one where patients used to confess their deepest fears. "Is she hiding something?" This was the moment. I could tell him everything: the affair, the embezzlement, the secret child, the forged signatures. I could prepare him for the earthquake coming in 48 hours. Instead, I committed the cleanest lie of my career. "Your mother loves you more than anything in this world," I said, meeting his eyes without flinching. "The fund is fine. She's probably just stressed about party planning. You know how she gets." He studied my face for 7 seconds. Then he nodded and left. I sat there for 20 minutes afterward, wondering what kind of father protects his son by lying to him. Monday at 4:07, Sterling forwarded an email from Russell Townsend with the subject line, "HELOC Investigation, Parallel Development." Sterling, FYI, our financial crimes unit opened an independent investigation into the HELOC fraud. Friday afternoon, based on bank's internal audit flagging. They don't know about your client's filing yet. This gives us prosecutorial separation, which strengthens both cases. Recommend your client proceed as planned. RT. The federal government was already hunting Marianne before I'd even decided to pull the trigger. The machine was bigger than my marriage. Wednesday evening, I locked myself in the study from 7 until 11 and created something I'd never made before, a 12-minute silent video. No music, no narration, just images arranged in chronological pairs. Left side, Leo, at 6 months first tooth. Right side, receipt from Miami. Fontainebleau, $600 per night, same date. Left side, Leo, at 3 years, first day of preschool. Right side, Kieran Vance, at 3 years photograph. I'd obtained from Celeste's investigation, same dark eyes as Marianne. Left side, Leo at 10, science fair trophy. Right side, New Orleans resort, receipt $550 per night. Left side, Leo's college fund statement from 2020, projected balance $94,000. Right side, Leo's college fund statement from last week, actual balance $18,000. I worked methodically, matching milestone against theft, joy against betrayal. Around hour 3, I realized I wasn't building evidence anymore. I was building a monument to my own blindness. The video ended with a single image, the $76,000 bank transfer from Leo's education account to Meridian Consulting Group, dated 4 months ago. The memo line read, "Kieran College Deposit." She'd stolen our son's future to fund her other son's education. I saved the file as leo_truth.mp4 and sent copies to Sterling, Celeste, and my father. Then, I sat in the dark study, watching the screensaver pixels drift across the monitor, and tried to remember what I'd felt the day Leo was born. Thursday night at 9:30, Leo knocked on my bedroom door. Marianne was at book club, or wherever she actually went Thursday nights. "Can I ask you something about college?" He sat on the edge of my bed, same spot where I used to read him stories about brave nights and happy endings. "Of course. If I get into Stanford, we can afford it right, like the fund will cover it. Ja, besties dem Oort die kan draaier sind." His eyes were so earnest, so trusting, so completely unaware that in 18 hours, every certainty in his life would detonate. We'll make it work, I said. I promise you'll go to whatever school you choose. Money won't be the reason you can't. He smiled, relieved, grateful, and hugged me goodnight. After he left, I stood at my bedroom window, looking at house number 7, 400 meters away through the trees. Lights were on in the upstairs bedroom. Somewhere in that house was an 18-year-old boy who'd grown up on money stolen from my son's future, raised by a man who didn't know his wife had another family, loved by a mother who'd spent 16 years living 2 complete lives. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow was the party. Tomorrow would be the last day of the life my son thought was real. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. Psychiatrists learn early that some truths require you to be fully awake when they arrive. Friday night, Marianne refilled her wine glass and smiled across the porch table. December air cool enough to see our breath, warm enough to sit outside, if you wore a sweater and didn't mind the chill. Mom Leo had gone to bed an hour ago. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant sound of someone's car pulling into a driveway 3 streets over. I've been thinking about expanding Meridian's client base, she said, leaning back in her chair with the confidence of someone who believed she'd built something legitimate. Maybe bring on 2 more properties by March. The revenue model is working perfectly. We could even consider hiring someone part-time to handle scheduling. I sipped my wine, a Bordeaux she'd selected, probably with stolen money, and watched her animate herself with plans for a business that existed solely to launder embezzlement. It sounds like solid growth, I said. And January. She leaned forward, touching my hand, her fingers warm despite the cold air. Leo will be back in school. Your practice slows down after holidays. What about Cabo? Just us like we used to do before Leo was born. We could use a week together. The irony was surgical. She wanted a vacation funded by fraud to reconnect with a husband who had spent 4 months building a federal prosecution case against her. It sounds good, I said, meeting her eyes without flinching. You've built something solid with Meridian. She smiled, genuine grateful, and squeezed my hand. Built with $380,000, stolen from my practice from accounts she thought I'd never audit. Built on a foundation of forged signatures and secret children, and 11 years of meticulously documented lies. Tomorrow, at 2 p.m., she would understand exactly how solid her foundation was. You've been different lately, she said, studying my face. Calmer, more present. I like it. Just trying to be here, I said. Really here. That part was true. I was present for every word, every gesture, every moment of her performance. Psychiatrists learn early to observe, without reacting to catalog behavior, without revealing analysis. I'd spent 28 years helping patients untangle their delusions. Now I sat across from my wife and watched her believe her own. She talked for another 20 minutes about property management strategies, about Leo's college applications, about remodeling the guest bathroom next spring. I responded with appropriate words. Makes sense. Good idea. We should do that. While thinking about the USB drive in my office drawer, containing 12 minutes of evidence arranged in chronological pairs, Leo's milestones on one side, her betrayals on the other. 28 years as a psychiatrist had taught me that people see what they expect to see. Marianne heard me say, sounds good, and believed I meant it because she had no framework for imagining I'd discovered everything and spent 4 months building an airtight case instead of confronting her directly. She'd constructed a reality where she was a successful entrepreneur and devoted mother, where her husband trusted her completely, where tomorrow's party would celebrate our son's 16th birthday without complications. I let her keep that reality for one more night. We went inside around 11:30. She kissed my cheek at the top of the stairs, said something about setting an early alarm to prepare Leo's birthday breakfast, and disappeared into our bedroom. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, listening to her moving through her nighttime routine. Water running, closet door, opening the familiar rhythm of someone who believed tomorrow would be ordinary. Then I went to my office and laid out my navy suit for the morning. Saturday at 8 a.m., Marianne set French toast and bacon on the kitchen table with the focused enthusiasm of a mother who believed she was giving her son a perfect birthday. The smell filled the kitchen, maple syrup, crisped bacon butter browning in the pan. Leo appeared in the doorway wearing his favorite hoodie, hair still wet from the shower, grinning. Mom, you didn't have to make all this, he said, sliding into his chair. But thanks, this is really good. 16 only happens once, sweetheart. Marianne beamed maternal and radiant, pouring orange juice into his glass. Your dad and I wanted today to be perfect. The caterers arrive at noon, band sets up at 1, guests at 2. You're going to have the best party Highland Park has seen. Leo bit into his French toast, nodding with teenage appreciation, completely unaware that in 6 hours, his entire understanding of his family would detonate. I stood by the counter in my Navy suit, already dressed USB drive in my jacket pocket, like a judge carrying a verdict. Marianne glanced at me, smiled approval. "You look handsome, though you're very early." Leo looked up, fork paws midair. "Dad, why are you wearing the Navy suit already? Party's not for like 6 hours." I met his eyes dark like his mother's, trusting like they'd been since he was old enough to recognize my face, and felt the weight of what I was about to do settle across my shoulders like a sentencing gavel. "Because today is important, Leo," I said. "Very important." He studied me for 3 seconds, then shrugged and returned to his breakfast. Marianne refilled his juice. The kitchen radio played something cheerful about December and snowfall and family gatherings. I watched Leo eat his birthday French toast and laugh at something Marianne said about the band's playlist, and I memorized that moment, the last breakfast where my 16-year-old son still believed his mother loved him more than she loved money and lies. The last morning, where our kitchen felt like a place where families ate together instead of a crime scene waiting to be documented. Marianne stood at the stove, spatula in hand, humming. Leo scrolled through his phone, smiling at messages from friends promising to arrive on time. At 9:47, my phone buzzed 3 times in rapid succession. Walter arriving 1:30. Ready. Celeste Financial, exhibits printed, en route. Sterling everything filed and sealed, pending Monday. See you at 2. Leo headed upstairs to shower and change. Marianne started arranging flowers in the living room, humming something cheerful that might have been from the playlist she'd chosen for the party. I touched the USB drive in my pocket one more time, then walked to my office to retrieve the 3 dossiers Sterling had prepared. Financial Forensics Behavioral Documentation, Legal Grounds. By 1 p.m., the Highland Park Country Club Pavilion would be transformed into a birthday celebration. 40 guests would arrive believing they were honoring a 16-year-old boy. I knew it would become something else entirely. Walter Prescott arrived at 2:45, 15 minutes early. Navy suit and silver tie, 82 years old, and walking with the measured stride of a man who'd entered courtrooms for 30 years, knowing exactly what verdict he intended to deliver. The Highland Park Country Club Pavilion stood ready white tent, 70-inch screen mounted on the north wall, 40 chairs around cream-draped tables. The smell of catered brisket drifted through the December air. Walter found me at the AV station laptop, open checking connections. He gripped my hand and looked me directly in the eye without speaking for 3 full seconds. "Your mother would have been proud," he said, voice low. "Not of what she did, of how you handled it." "You taught me that justice isn't about anger," I said. "It's about evidence and timing." He nodded once. No more words needed. Then he walked to the front table and waited with the patience of a man who'd spent 3 decades watching cases build toward inevitable conclusions. Guests began arriving at 3. Leo's friends, first 16-year-olds awkward in formal wear, then my colleagues, family, relatives, neighbors, who'd watched Leo grow up. Marianne greeted everyone at the pavilion entrance, radiant in a sapphire dress, perfect hostess. "Thank you so much for coming," she said to each arrival, touching arms beaming. "Leo's been so excited. Please help yourself to drinks. The formal program starts at 5. She moved through the space with complete confidence, checking catering stations, adjusting flowers, ensuring every detail matched her vision. She thought she was orchestrating a perfect celebration. She had no framework for understanding she was standing in a prosecution exhibit. Celeste Mercer arrived at 3:27, carrying a leather portfolio containing 11 years of documented fraud. Charcoal gray, minimal jewelry, the controlled appearance of someone prepared to testify. "Everything ready?" I asked quietly. "Then financial exhibits, timeline documentation, and witness coordination," she whispered. "Sterling's here. We're positioned." Sterling Blackwell stood near the west entrance, talking casually with guests' silver hair and tailored suit. The briefcase at his feet contained filed paperwork for emergency custody asset freezes and federal criminal referrals that would be unsealed Monday morning. I inserted the USB drive at 3:45 and ran a final technical check. Video loaded perfectly, audio muted. 12 minutes, 43 seconds of silent evidence ready to play. Marianne passed by, saw me at the laptop, smiled. "Is the slideshow ready?" she asked. "I'm so excited to see what photos you chose." "It's ready," I said. "Exactly what he needs to see." She squeezed my shoulder and moved on to greet more guests. The party began at 5. Leo sat at the head table, flanked by friends, grinning, relaxed, completely unaware that in 90 minutes, his entire understanding of his family would detonate. The band played jazz standards. Dinner service began at 5:30, brisket sliders, truffle mac and cheese, roasted Brussels sprouts. Guests ate and talked and laughed. Watching Marianne orchestrate the party was like watching a defendant testify confidently before the prosecution presents the recordings. She moved with total conviction that her performance was flawless, unaware that every smile and gracious gesture was being observed by witnesses who would soon understand exactly what kind of person stood before them. She touched Leo's shoulder when she passed his table. She laughed at a guest's joke. She checked her phone once and smiled at whatever message appeared. She believed she'd built a good life. She believed tomorrow would continue exactly as today had. I stood in the corner near the screen, sipping mineral water, watching everything waiting. At 6:15, Leo opened his gifts. Friends gave him video games, gift cards, a framed photo from the football team. Marianne and I presented the laptop he'd been researching for months. No way! Leo held it up, genuine teenage joy lighting his face. Mom, Dad, this is the laptop I wanted. How did you know the exact model? Because we pay attention, sweetheart, Marianne said, touching his shoulder with maternal warmth. 16 is special. Guests applauded. Leo hugged his mother, then walked around to hug me. I held my son for 4 seconds, memorizing the weight of him, the trust in his grip, knowing what I was about to take from him. A colleague approached me at 6:23. Beautiful party, Dr. Prescott, she said. You and Marianne did an amazing job. Leo seemed so happy. I sipped my mineral water, cold, tasteless, exactly as necessary as the precision required to destroy someone methodically. We wanted today to be memorable, I said with a measured smile, something he'd never forget. Walter sat at the front table through all of it, straight-backed and silent, occasionally glancing at me with small nods. He understood exactly what I was doing and why I was doing it this way. Justice delivered publicly with evidence in front of witnesses who mattered. I watched Leo laugh with his friends 16 years old and surrounded by people who loved him, and I understood that in approximately 8 minutes, I would take something from him that could never be returned, the belief that his mother was a good person. But I would give him something else, the truth delivered by a father who loved him enough to be the one who had to say it. At 6:28, the MC tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Julian Prescott has prepared a special commemorative video for Leo's 16th birthday. Let's dim the lights and watch. Applause filled the pavilion. 40 guests turned their chairs toward the 70-inch screen, smiling, expecting heartwarming childhood photos set to sentimental music. I stood from my corner position, walked to the laptop, and inserted the USB drive. The screen glowed white waiting. Marianne stood near Leo's table, beaming completely unsuspecting. I pressed play. I stood at the microphone with my hand on the laptop keyboard. 40 faces turned toward me, expecting birthday sentimentality, and pressed play without preamble or warning. The 70-inch screen filled with split images. Left side, Leo Prescott, newborn, wrapped in blue hospital blanket. Timestamp, December 12th, 2009. Right side, Kieran Vance, newborn, wrapped in identical blue hospital blanket. Timestamp, March 14th, 2008. 2 boys, same dark eyes, different fathers, 1 mother. The room was silent for 8 seconds. Then a guest whispered confused, "Who's the other boy? Why are there 2?" The video continued. Left Leo at 18 months first steps in our living room. Right Kieran at 18 months first steps on a beach resort balcony. Timestamp matched both autumn 2008. Left Leo's 3rd birthday backyard party, homemade cake. Right Kieran's 3rd birthday Miami Fontainebleau poolside professional photographer. Receipt visible in corner, $600 per night. The murmurs grew louder. Guests leaning forward, squinting at the screen, beginning to understand, but not wanting to believe. Left Leo at 6 first day of elementary school, holding my hand. Right Kieran at 6. Sedona Resort, holding Marianne's hand. Same month, same year, different families. At minute 5, a guest gasped horrified recognition spreading across her face. Those timestamps, she said, but voice barely audible. Those are the same years. She had another. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I stood at the podium watching the screen, not watching Marianne. I already knew what her face would show. I'd spent 4 months preparing for this moment. I didn't need to see her reaction to know it was happening, exactly as I'd planned. The video continued its methodical progression. Left Leo at 10, Science Fair trophy, proud grin. Right Kieran at 10, New Orleans resort room, service receipt showing $550 per night. Left Leo at 13 school basketball team photo. Right Kieran at 13 luxury ski resort, professional equipment. Marianne visible in background, wearing sunglasses and a smile I recognize from our own family photos. At minute 8, Leo's voice broke the silence. Young, confused, desperate. He turned to look at Marianne standing frozen beside his table. Mom, what is this? Who is that? Marianne's face had lost all color. Her hands gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white. It Leo, sweetheart, she said, voice weak and trembling. There's context you don't. But the video kept playing. I watched my son's face in the dim light, reflecting from the screen, 16 years old, seeing his mother's lies displayed in timestamps and bank transfers, learning that the college fund he'd been told about since childhood had been stolen to buy sports cars and resort vacations for a man named Dominic Vance and a boy named Kieran who shared none of his DNA but all of his mother's attention. Left Leo at 15 acceptance letter to advanced placement courses. Right. Kieran at 15, new sports car in the driveway, price tag. Visible $12,000. Left Leo last month asking about Stanford tuition, being told the fund would cover it. Right bank statement, Leo Prescott Education Fund, November 2025. Expected balance based on 17 years of contributions, $94,000. Actual balance, $18,000. The final 30 seconds arrived. Black screen, white text, single image. Bank transfer record. From Leo Prescott Education Fund to Dominic Vance account. Amount $76,000. Memo Kieran College deposit. Date August 15th, 2025. The screen froze on that image. 12 minutes and 43 seconds. 2,300 frames. $76,000 in white text on black background. The room understood now what I had discovered 4 months ago. Marianne Prescott had spent 17 years stealing from her own son to fund another woman's child. Except Kieran wasn't another woman's child. He was hers. The screen went black. Lights stayed dimmed. Marianne found her voice desperate, scrambling, attempting narrative control, the way guilty defendants always do when evidence destroys their credibility. There's a misunderstanding here, she said, voice rising, looking around at 40 witnesses. Julian has taken things out of context. If everyone would just let me explain. Walter Prescott stood, 82 years old, perfectly straight posture, navy suit, former Texas state judge. The room fell completely silent. He didn't speak immediately. He looked at Marianne with 30 years of courtroom authority, let the silence build for 5 full seconds, while she stood there, attempting to construct a defense that made sense. Then he asked the only question that mattered. How many years, Marianne? 4 words. Calm, measured, devastating. Not who, not why, not how much. How many years had she looked at Leo and me across breakfast tables and dinner conversations and birthday parties while maintaining a parallel family funded by theft? How do you answer the question, how many years, when the honest answer is 17 and the room full of witnesses has just watched 12 minutes proving you spent nearly 2 decades stealing from your own child to support your secret second family? Marianne opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, no sound came out. She looked at me for the first time since the video started. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly, her mouth opening and closing without sound. I met her eyes and said nothing. Didn't need to. Walter's question hung in the air. How many years? 40 witnesses waited for the answer everyone already knew. 17 years, 17 birthdays, 17 Christmases. 17 years of lies told to a boy who believed his mother loved him more than anything in the world. The silence in the pavilion was absolute. The silence lasted 11 seconds. I counted them, psychiatrists' habit of measuring discomfort, before Marianne's gaze moved from Walter to me to Leo, standing frozen at his birthday table with tears reflecting the dim party lights. Leo stood, 16 years old. His voice broke when he spoke. Hey, Mom. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Did you ever love me, or was I just the mistake that got in the way of your real family? Marianne looked at him, then at Walter, then at the 40 pairs of eyes watching her in absolute silence. She walked to the nearest chair, sat down heavily, looked at the floor, and said 2 words, 17 years. Not an explanation, not a justification, not a defense. Just the numerical acknowledgement of how long she'd maintained the lies, how many birthdays, how many Christmases, how many breakfast conversations and goodnight kisses and parent-teacher conferences while living a completely separate life 400 meters away. Walter sat down slowly, The judge's work was complete. He'd asked the question that mattered. She'd answered it. The rest was just legal procedure. A guest near the back stood gathering her coat, whispering to her husband. "We should go. We should leave them alone." Others followed, quiet, respectful. Nobody spoke to Marianne. Nobody looked at her directly. They filed out of the pavilion like mourners leaving a funeral, except the person who died was trust itself. I walked to Leo's table and put my hand on his shoulder. "Come on, Leo," I said quietly. "Let's go home." He nodded without speaking and let me guide him toward the exit. Marianne remained seated in the chair alone in the white tent, with the caterers beginning to quietly dismantle the celebration she'd planned for weeks. The 70-inch screen still stood against the north wall, dark and silent evidence delivered. I didn't look back at her. Walter followed us to the parking lot, gripped my shoulder once firm supportive, then drove away in silence. Leo sat in the passenger seat on the drive home and stared out the window without speaking. I didn't try to fill the silence. Sometimes the most therapeutic thing a psychiatrist can do is let someone process without interference. In 28 years of psychiatric practice, I had watched hundreds of confessions patients admitting affairs, addictions, abuse, fraud, but I had never seen acknowledgement so complete and so empty simultaneously. Marianne said 17 years and answered every question while explaining absolutely nothing about why. She'd counted the years the same way I had. She knew exactly how long she'd been stealing from our son. She just couldn't articulate what had made her believe it was acceptable. We arrived home at 8:30. The house was dark. Leo went straight to his room without eating dinner. I sat in the living room with a single lamp lit and waited. Marianne didn't come home. At 10 p.m., Leo came downstairs. He'd changed out of his birthday clothes into sweatpants and a t-shirt. He sat on the couch across from me, posture straight face, composed. "When did you find out?" he asked. "About all of it." I met his eyes. He deserved honesty. "I started noticing things months ago," I said. "Small inconsistencies, the phone surveillance, GPS tracking. I needed time to be absolutely certain before doing what I did tonight." He nodded, slowly processing. "Why didn't you tell me before the party?" The question I'd been expecting. The one I'd prepared to answer, but still didn't have perfect language for. "Because I wanted you to have one more birthday where you felt like your family was intact," I said. "I know that sounds selfish now, but I thought you deserved that. One more day of normal before everything changed." Leo looked at his hands, then back at me. Does she actually love him, Kieran? He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't think she knows. I think she built two separate lives and convinced herself both were real." "Is he," Leo paused, "is he my brother?" "Biologically half-brother, but you don't owe him anything, Leo. You don't have to think about him at all if you don't want to." He absorbed this quietly. "Dad," his voice was steady despite everything, "my education fund, the $76,000 she took, will be fully restored," I said, immediately firm and absolute. "I promise you, Leo, every dollar. You will go to Stanford or wherever you choose, and money will not be the reason you can't." He nodded again, silent for 30 seconds. "What happens now legally? Monday morning, my attorney files divorce papers and emergency custody motions. Your mother will likely face federal charges for bank fraud, the forged signatures on the home equity loan. You'll probably be asked to give a statement at some point, but I'll be with you for all of it. And the other family, Dominic and Kieran. What happens to them?" "I don't know," I said. "That's not my concern. My concern is you." Leo looked at me with eyes that seemed older than they had been 12 hours earlier. I looked at my 16-year-old son, asking about his stolen college fund, with the same calm precision I used to analyze psychiatric case studies, and I understood he would survive this, not unchanged, not unscathed, but intact in the ways that mattered. "Do you hate her?" he asked quietly. "No," I said, and realized it was true. "I don't hate her, Leo. I'm disappointed. I'm angry about what she took from you, but hate requires more energy than I have left for her." He processed this with unexpected maturity. "Okay," he said finally. I think I understand." He stood from the couch, looked at me with the expression of someone who'd aged years in hours, and said, "Good night, Dad." No anger, just exhaustion. I watched him climb the stairs to his bedroom, the same stairs he'd run down that morning, excited about his 16th birthday party. Monday morning, Sterling would file divorce papers and criminal referrals. Federal prosecutors would begin converting Saturday's public exposure into permanent legal consequences. Tonight, my son went to bed in a house where his mother didn't live anymore, in a family that no longer existed in the form he'd known for 16 years. But he'd said, "I understand," with his father's voice, not his mother's. That mattered more than I could articulate. Sterling Blackwell filed 3 documents at Dallas County Family Court at exactly 9:17 Monday morning: petition for divorce, emergency motion for asset preservation, and petition for emergency custody modification. I sat in his downtown office watching the city wake up through floor-to-ceiling windows. Leo was at school. Marianne's location remained unknown. She hadn't come home Saturday night or Sunday. Sterling checked his watch, set his phone on the desk between us. 9:17 a.m., he said. Emergency injunction should be reviewed within the hour. Judge Martinez handles Monday emergency motions. She's former prosecutor, doesn't tolerate financial fraud. We waited. I'd spent 28 years conducting therapy sessions where 50 minutes felt like hours. Waiting for a judge to freeze my wife's access to stolen money felt different. Time moved with surgical precision. At 10:03, Sterling's phone lit up with a notification. He read it, then turned the screen toward me. Asset freeze approved and executed. He said professional and measured. Every account, every property, every credit line. Marianne just lost access to everything she stole. 46 minutes. From filing to execution in 46 minutes. Meridian LLC accounts frozen. Marianne's personal accounts frozen. House number 7, title frozen. All credit cards disabled. The Delaware Shell Company dissolved by court order. 17 years of financial infrastructure dismantled before lunch. My phone started vibrating at 10:15. Marianne calling? I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 10:19, 10:27, 10:34, 10:41, 10:47. 5 calls in 32 minutes. She's called 5 times, I said, watching the 6th call come through. I'm not answering. Sterling nodded approval. Good. Let her attorney explain that the postnuptial agreement she insisted on has a fraud clause, clause 7, that voids the entire document if either party committed financial deception during the marriage. She wrote her own legal destruction into the contract. The 6th call went to voicemail. 7 minutes later, Sterling received an email from an attorney I didn't recognize. Subject line: representation of Marianne Prescott. Initial contact. She found counsel, Sterling said, scanning the message. Good, now we can proceed formally. Legal proceedings move like continental drift until they don't. 17 years of fraud discovered in 4 months. Assets frozen in 46 minutes, a marriage dissolved by a single clause the defendant herself insisted on including. The hearing took place 6 days before Christmas. Dallas County Family Courthouse, 3rd floor, Judge Victoria Brennan presiding. She'd handled family law cases for 14 years, with a reputation for methodical evidence review and zero tolerance for financial fraud in divorce proceedings. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Sterling. Celeste Mercer sat directly behind us with her forensic accounting files. Marianne sat 20 feet away beside her attorney, wearing navy blue face, composed but pale. She didn't look at me. I didn't look at her. Judge Brennan entered at precisely 2 p.m. We stood. She sat. We sat. Sterling presented the 3 dossiers. Your Honor, we submit 3 exhibits, he said, voice calm and authoritative. Financial forensics by certified examiner Celeste Mercer, documenting systematic fraud over 17 years. DNA, evidence confirming biological relationship between respondent and non-marital child Kieran Vance, and documentary evidence of federal bank fraud by a forged HELOC signature. Judge Brennan accepted the files without comment. Then she read. Complete silence for 20 minutes. I watched her face, neutral professional, occasionally making notes in margins. She read Celeste's financial analysis page by page. She studied the DNA lab report. She examined the forged signature comparison prepared by Sterling's handwriting expert. Marianne's attorney sat motionless, waiting for an opening that never came. At minute 18, Judge Brennan paused on a page I knew from the angle it was the bank transfer, showing $76,000 moved from Leo's education fund to Dominic Vance's account. She read that page twice. At minute 20, she closed the file. Counsel, she said, looking at Marianne's attorney with the steady gaze of someone who'd reviewed thousands of divorce cases and recognized fraud when documentation proved it beyond reasonable doubt. Does your client contest the DNA results, the forged signature analysis, or the financial audit trail? Marianne's attorney stood, cleared his throat, looked at his notes. We contest the characterization of certain transactions. Your Honor, he said, voice lacking conviction. But the documentation is extensive. Extensive, Judge Brennan repeated. Not a question, an assessment. She opened the file again, flipped to a specific page, read aloud. The post-nuptial agreement executed in 2010 contains Clause 7, which explicitly states that any fraud or financial deception by either party voids the entire agreement. She looked up. The evidence before this court demonstrates systematic prolonged financial fraud, spanning 17 years, including embezzlement, identity theft, and federal banking violations. She closed the file with finality. Clause 7 of your client's own post-nuptial agreement has been fully applied. Marianne's attorney said nothing more. I had spent 28 years diagnosing pathologies of the mind, sitting in that courtroom, watching Judge Brennan apply Clause 7. I understood that Marianne's pathology was complete. She had been so confident in her deception that she built legal protections, never imagining they would be used against her own fraud. The postnuptial agreement is void. Judge Brennan continued, formal and absolute. All assets revert to marital estate for equitable distribution under Texas community property law. Custody hearing is scheduled for January 4th. Asset distribution hearing, February 3rd. Federal prosecutors have been notified per banking fraud regulations. She looked at Marianne directly. Mrs. Prescott, you should consult with criminal defense counsel in addition to your family law attorney. This court is required to report suspected federal banking violations. That report was filed this morning. Marianne's face drained of remaining color. Judge Brennan stood, we stood, she exited. Sterling gathered the dossiers. Marianne's attorney packed his briefcase, quickly avoiding eye contact. Outside the courtroom, I asked Sterling about the federal case. His answer was simple and devastating. Russell Townsend expects charges filed within 60 days. Bank fraud, wire fraud, identity theft. Each count carries federal prison time. January would bring custody determination and asset distribution. But Marianne's legal destruction had already been completed by a clause she'd insisted on, including 12 years ago, never imagining she'd be the one accused of fraud. Judge Brennan's voice filled the courtroom with the methodical precision of someone who had reviewed 217 pages of evidence and found every claim substantiated. The court's findings are as follows. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Sterling. Marianne sat 20 feet away beside her attorney, face blank, hands folded. She hadn't looked at me once during the entire hearing. Petitioner Julian Prescott is awarded the Highland Park marital residence. Judge Brennan read from her written order, voice formal and absolute. Primary custody of minor child, Leo Prescott, age 16, and the investment portfolio valued at $4.2 million, representing assets accumulated during the marriage prior to respondent's fraudulent activities. Sterling made a small note on his legal pad. Didn't react otherwise. We'd known this verdict was coming for 3 weeks. Judge Brennan continued. Respondent's embezzlement of $76,000 from the Minor Child's Education Fund is hereby remedied. The fund shall be restored to its projected value of $94,000 from respondent's remaining assets. $94,000, $18,000 more than Marianne had stolen. Not just restitution compensation. Interest on betrayal, calculated in dollar amounts that would ensure Leo never wondered if his college options were limited by his mother's theft. Marianne's attorney shifted in his chair, said nothing. There was nothing to say. Respondent Marianne Prescott is ordered to vacate the marital residence within 72 hours. Judge Brennan said, tone hardening slightly. Personal effects may be retrieved within 30 days under supervised access. Any items remaining after 30 days become property of the petitioner. 72 hours. 3 days to leave a house she'd lived in for 16 years. A house she'd used as home base while maintaining a second family 400 meters away. The property known as House Number 7, purchased with proceeds from fraudulent activity, is seized pending federal criminal proceedings. Current occupant Dominic Vance has been notified of eviction. Dominic Vance would lose his home. Kieran Vance would lose his home. Collateral damage from Marianne's 17 years of theft. I felt no satisfaction about that, just clinical acknowledgement that fraud has consequences that extend beyond the perpetrator. Judge Brennan looked up from her order directly at Marianne. All evidence of bank fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft has been transferred to Assistant United States Attorney Russell Townsend. This court's jurisdiction over criminal matters is complete. Federal prosecutors will proceed independently. What does justice sound like? It sounds like a family court judge reading findings in a measured voice for 8 minutes, while a woman who stole from her own son sits motionless knowing that federal prosecutors are already preparing indictments that will send her to prison regardless of this civil verdict. The postnuptial agreement dated 2010 is void under Clause 7, as previously ruled, Judge Brennan concluded. All contested assets revert to marital estate for equitable distribution as outlined in this order. This court's ruling is final. Petitioner is awarded costs and attorney fees. She closed the file. This matter is concluded. We stood. Judge Brennan exited. We sat. Mary Ann remained motionless for another 10 seconds, then stood slowly and left the courtroom without looking back. Her attorney followed, carrying his briefcase with the defeated posture of someone who'd known from the first filing that his client had no defense against 217 pages of documented fraud. Sterling gathered the dossiers. Clean, he said quietly. As clean as divorce gets when one party committed 17 years of federal crimes. We shook hands in the courthouse hallway. He left to file final paperwork. I walked to my car in the parking garage, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled out my phone. Leo answered on the second ring. Leo. I said, voice measured and calm. Verdict is out. Everything exactly as I told you it would be. Silence for 3 seconds. Then his careful, controlled voice. And my education fund is fully restored, I said. $94,000, more than she took. Longer silence this time. 5 seconds, 7, 10. Then his voice breaking slightly despite his attempt to stay controlled. Thank you, Dad. I know you. Thank you. I looked out at the December afternoon through my windshield. Gray sky, cold light. The courthouse building in my rearview mirror, where Mary Ann was probably sitting in a conference room with her attorney learning that federal charges would follow within 60 days. Come home around 6, I said. Cook dinner for me. What confusion in his voice, almost laughing. Cook dinner. Und boin rege moi spestal. Pasta, I said, allowing myself a small smile. Whatever kind you want, I'll be home in 20 minutes. Okay. His voice lighter, now younger. Yeah, I can do that. He hung up. I sat in my car holding the phone, watching December afternoon light fade over the courthouse parking lot, and I understood that we would both survive this not unchanged, not unscathed, but together in a house that was legally ours, with a college fund that could never be stolen again. 17 years of fraud, 4 months of investigation, 8 minutes of judicial findings that dismantled Mary Ann's life with the same methodical precision she had used to build her lies. And now my 16-year-old son was going home to figure out which pasta sauce to make, wondering if we had garlic bread, probably texting friends about something completely unrelated to divorce proceedings and federal criminal referrals, normalcy returning in small increments. I started the car and drove toward Highland Park, past the courthouse where Mary Ann's attorney was probably explaining that prison time was inevitable, past Sterling's office, where final asset transfer documents were being prepared, toward the house, where Leo would be pulling out pasta and debating marinara versus Alfredo. My home. Leo's home. Ours. The education fund sat in a new account, $94,000 in Leo's name, only requiring his signature for any withdrawal protected by banking regulations and court order from anyone who might try to steal from him again. Stanford, Harvard, Yale, MIT. Whatever school sent him an acceptance letter in the spring money would not be the reason he couldn't go. I drove through December traffic, thinking about my son learning to cook pasta in a kitchen that finally legally permanently belonged to us, in a house where his mother no longer lived in a life that was smaller but honest. 3 months from now, on a March morning, with spring beginning to warm, Dallas Leo, and I would sit on the back porch drinking coffee while he showed me acceptance letters. But tonight we would eat pasta, and that was enough. 3 weeks after Leo's birthday party, I woke to a house that felt genuinely quiet for the first time in 17 years. Not the quiet of hidden things holding their breath. Just December, light through the bedroom curtains, and my son sleeping at the end of the hall. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window. The backyard oak had lost its leaves. Sterling's final paperwork had cleared Thursday. Mary Ann's plea agreement was signed 4 years federal minimum security banking fraud and identity theft. Agent Townsend called it clean. He meant efficient. I meant something different by that word. Leo came downstairs at 9, hair sideways from sleep pulling an oversized hoodie over his head. Pancakes, he asked. Batter's your job, I said. Flipping his mind, he pulled out eggs and milk without arguing the division. We worked quietly, him measuring me, waiting for the griddle to hold the right heat. When the first pancake set and I flipped it cleanly, he gave a small, approving nod, the kind teenagers reserve for adults who've earned back the right to be considered competent. We ate at the kitchen table. He drowned his stack in maple syrup. I drank coffee. Halfway through breakfast, without looking up from his plate, he said, "Stanford sent a pre-admission interest form." When? Yesterday. And he looked up then. "I think I want to go." I held his eyes for a moment. $94,000 sat in an account bearing only his name, protected by court order, requiring his signature alone for any withdrawal. He didn't need to ask whether it was possible. He already knew. "Let's then go," I said. He nodded and returned to his pancakes. 28 years of psychiatric practice had given me a vocabulary for healing. Stages, milestones, coping frameworks. Sitting across from my 16-year-old son, eating breakfast in a kitchen that no longer held secrets, I understood that none of that vocabulary was adequate for this. Healing didn't look like resolution. It looked like Leo asking about Stanford between bites, trusting that the answer would simply be yes. After breakfast, he washed the dishes while I read the paper. At noon, he pulled on his jacket. "Meeting friends," he said. "Back by 6, I'll cook." "A deal." He left. The house settled into Saturday silence. I stayed at the kitchen table with a second cup of coffee, watching December light move across the floor in slow degrees. Marianne's sentencing was April. Federal prosecutors had everything they needed. What happened next was no longer mine to manage. What was mine, this kitchen, that backyard, a college fund that couldn't be touched, and a son who'd decided on Stanford over breakfast without fear. I had spent 4 months building a case precise enough to survive federal scrutiny. What I hadn't anticipated was how much simpler everything would feel once truth replaced performance. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked once and went quiet. I finished my coffee. That was enough. And to you listening to my story, remember this truth always has a cost. But living in someone else's lie costs far more. For 17 years, I chose not to see the patterns. As a psychiatrist, I had the tools to recognize deception, but I applied them to my patients and never to my own home. Don't make my mistake. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. The small inconsistencies you notice aren't paranoia. They're your mind trying to tell you what your heart doesn't want to hear. The lesson from this family betrayal isn't about revenge. It's about protecting those who depend on you. When you discover family betrayal, you face choices: confront immediately, or gather evidence, handle privately, or expose publicly. I chose methodical truth over emotional reaction. Every family story is different, but this family story taught me that justice without preparation is just noise. I believe God gave me the patience to handle this correctly, even when anger would have been easier. Protect the innocent first. Document everything. Choose truth. If this story about family betrayal resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment telling me what you would have done differently. I read everyone. Subscribe to Revenge Dad for more family stories about truth, justice, and protecting what matters. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story contains fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes, but the lessons about trust, betrayal, and protection are very real. Remember, your instincts are there for a reason.